Right to the low performers with KCBD News Channel 11's Case Wilbanks.
Ayashi Midtown at 3701 19th had 14 violations. Here's a look at their priority violations. Multiple cold foods were above the safe cold temperature of 41 degrees, including raw salmon, green onions, and spicy tuna. The dishwasher was not sanitizing. The can opener was dirty. Items were marked with an 8-day date mark. They must be used within 7 days. There was no hand soap at a hand sink. The report shows most of the violations were corrected at the time of the inspection. District 1 at 1910 Quaker had 14 violations. Here's a look at their priority violations. 2 packages of raw beef were thawing in standing water. They were above the safe cold temperature of 41 degrees. Raw beef was stored above ready-to-eat jalapenos. Raw shrimp was above onions. Knives were dirty. An employee used their bare hands to handle ready-to-eat cut green onions. The sanitizing testing device was expired. The bottom shelf of the 3-compartment sink was lined with soiled cardboard. The inspector notes due to the number and nature of the violations, management did not show proper food safety knowledge. The report shows most of the violations were corrected while the inspector was there. China Walk inside the South Plains Mall at 6002 Slide had 19 violations. Here's a look at their priority violations. Crab rangoons were above the safe cold temperature of 41 degrees. An unopened package of wontons was molded. The 3-compartment sink was not sanitizing. Employees were washing and rinsing in the 3-compartment sink, but not sanitizing. The can opener was dirty. An employee washed off their gloves in a hand sink. The soap dispenser at a hand sink was not working. A hand sink was blocked. A toxic item was not labeled. A bottle of medicine was stored near spices. The mop sink was not plumbed correctly. The inspector notes due to the number and the nature of the violations, active managerial control was not observed. The inspection shows most violations were corrected while the inspector was there. Tech Cafe at 6810 Milwaukee had 21 violations. Here's a look at their priority violations. Several items were above the safe cold temperature of 41 degrees, including salsa, milk, and blue cheese dressing. Raw steak was stored over onions and ham. Packages of ham did not have a date mark. Dirty utensils were stored with clean ones. Utensils were chipped or melted. They must be kept in good repair. A can was dented. This can cause botulism. A can was not labeled. Employees turned off their faucet at the hand sink with their bare hands. A barrier like a paper towel must be used to prevent cross-contamination. The inspector notes due to the number and the nature of the violations, management did not demonstrate proper food safety knowledge. The report shows most violations were corrected at the time of the inspection. Aranda's Taqueria at 4134th had 25 violations. Here's a look at their priority violations. Roasted jalapenos were not at least 135 degrees. Barbacoa did not have a date mark. There was an accumulation of black debris in the ice buckets. The can opener was dirty. Clean utensils were stored with food residue on them. Cans were dented. This can cause botulism. An employee was eating in the food prep area and returned to work without washing their hands. An employee handled a cell phone while wearing gloves and then returned to work without washing their hands and changing gloves. Employees handled tortillas with their bare hands. The facility does not have a bare hand policy. First aid kits were stored above ready-to-eat tortillas. A cup and spray nozzle were on the hand sink. Hand sinks are for hand washing only to prevent cross-contamination. The food handler certifications for employees were expired. The inspector notes due to the number and nature of the violations, management did not show proper food safety knowledge. The report shows most of the violations were corrected while the inspector was there. And now to the good news. Here's a look at this week's top performers. McDonald's at 6001 19th, Daiquiris To Go at 5412 Slide, and Scooter's Coffee at 8101 Indiana.